YouTube, it's Faye, and for today's video, we're gonna do rear brakes on this Gen 2 Tundra. Now, if you're watching this video, I assume that you have one of these trucks and that you want this tutorial. So then you already know that these trucks go through brakes, kind of like they go through fuel. So today, we're gonna be upgrading to the PowerStop Z36 Truck and Tow Brake Upgrade Kit. We're gonna do pads and rotors. This is not a truck that you want to turn rotors on. The rotors warp really easily on this truck, especially if you are doing any towing or hauling anything in the bed of the pickup. This is mostly what you're gonna see in the front, but this can happen in the rear as well. And there are a couple little tips and tricks in doing this job in a way that will be problem-free for you. So follow along, and I hope that you enjoy this tutorial. Tools and parts that you are going to need to do this job. Or at least this is everything that I use to do this job on the other side. And I laid them all out here. Do you need all of these things? Well, maybe not, but watch till the end, see what you want, see what you don't want. So starting with a brake fluid bleeder bottle. This is not because I'm doing a brake fluid flush today in this video, although I am actually doing one today. This is because when I like to push the caliper pistons back, I like to bleed that fluid out of the caliper rather than pushing it back through the system. So this is just to collect that old fluid. Obviously a flashlight, a magnetic tray, a piece of wire. You could also use a bungee cord or some zip ties to hang your caliper out of the way, so it's not just putting pressure on that flexible hose. A couple different styles of brushes. Love these for cleaning out those calipers, like the brackets that hold the brake pad area. And then this I also like for cleaning out the calipers, but for where the slider pins go. Two different styles of brushes. I use them both. Then I also use a ratchet, and with this ratchet, I used a 12mm socket. I chose a 12, not anything specifically for this job, but for these little bolts that I use to get the rotor off. This is just, they're just a 12mm head bolt. I will link something similar in the description below. I think I got these from a Gen 2 Prius recall from back in the day, if I recall correctly, but they're a solid. They're a high strength bolt, so they are perfect for using over and over and over again. I consider these a tool I have in my toolbox. I use a large flathead screwdriver, little pocket screwdriver. This 8mm wrench is just for the little bleeder on the back of the caliper. A hammer, it's just for hitting the rotor as I'm forcing it in with my little bolts. I also just like to give it a good whack. Obviously gloves. Yes, I do use a mask because I do not like breathing in brake dust. Speaking of brake dust, I use this emery cloth. This is a lot of it. I only break off a teeny tiny little section. This is just to resurface the shoes, the e-brake shoes, while I'm in there. So I do use that. A brake pad thickness gauge. I use this in this video, so I put this here. This is a simple little tool for pushing that caliper piston back in. Love it, love it. You can use just a screwdriver or a C-clamp. This is just so easy and so cheap. Love this. I use two 17mm wrenches for this job. I like this one because it's super long. There's also a 19 on this end, but I don't use that. This is the one for leverage, and I use this one just for getting that upper slider pin out a little bit faster. I just like a ratcheting one, but I do not like putting a whole bunch of torque on a ratcheting one because I've actually broken the ratcheting end before. Not on this particular one, but in another one that I had. Now, got some parts. I'll come back to some more tools. For parts, I actually did need to replace these bleeder screws. They were completely clogged on the other side, so we'll see what this side's like. They come in a set of two, so we might as well replace them both today. Here we have the brake pads, the carbon fiber ceramic pads in the PowerStop upgrade kit. Also comes with brake lube. Also comes with new hardware if you want to use it. Also comes with these rotors. They are the drilled and slotted rotors, and of course they're labeled driver and passenger side, so you can't possibly get it wrong. Love that. Also gonna be using a little bit of Loctite today. And these are two other different types of lubricants you can use in addition to what comes in the kit, or if you didn't buy this kit and you're doing OE, that's totally fine. We're gonna be using both of these today as well. These brush comes in can. I don't know. I hate using the brushes. I think that they're just like so messy. So I like to use a little acid brush and give it a little haircut there so we don't make a mess. Tons of brake parts cleaner, PB blaster, especially for my northern friends. And this is a 22mm socket just for removing the lug nuts. This particular truck has a wheel lock key that is required as well, so make sure you grab that. And I think luckily for me, this is also a 22. Yes, it is. Couple air impact ratchets, and this little fella, I actually got this for my friend Danny as well for Christmas last year. This is awesome. You'll see why I use this. Might not be so necessary for a bunch of my Texas friends, but for those of y'all up north that are dealing with a lot of rust, you will definitely need this, or your brakes will make noise. What am I forgetting? The only other socket that I used was a 17mm wobble socket, and then of course you're gonna need a lot of rags. All right, let's get into it. Surprise, surprise, we're gonna start by removing the rear wheel. Now make sure that you do have chocks on your front wheels, and obviously, don't set the e-brake. Now, when your vehicle is on the ground, you should loosen all of these by hand. You're not supposed to use an impact on a wheel lock key, okay? I said it. Oh, what the heck? Got a weird one. This one has a random strange 21 there, but I actually have a bunch of this style of lug nut around, so I will replace it with the right one, or at least a matching one. 21. Weird. All right, let's take a look at what we are working with. Now, this is a lot of rust for Texas, but I'm sure y'all coming from up north are looking at this with envy. Regardless though, this is not a rotor that I would ever want to reuse, and I don't advocate for pad slapping anyway, but it's right here at the end. Like if you can, well, I'm wearing gloves right now, but if you can run your thumbnail, oh yeah, and it definitely gets caught. If you have a nail, which I don't have much of a nail, there we go. Nails on a chalkboard. Okay, well, anyway, you get the idea. My nail gets caught in these little ridges. So what's gonna happen is if I was to reuse this rotor with a brand new pad and I was to put it against that uneven surface, what I would get is that not all of this braking surface would actually hit that rotor. It would take a lot of braking for this to wear to that same pattern. So you would only get maybe like 40 to, I don't know, 50-ish% of the actual pad touching the rotor if you were to use it like this. So I don't know, you understand why that's not a good thing to do. But let's also see, through this little window in the caliper, you can often measure the thickness of the rear pad. Just looking at this, I'm a little nervous because the pads on the passenger side were less than 2mm, and that is looking a lot thicker. And when you're measuring brake pad thickness, just be mindful to measure the actual pad itself. You don't want to measure the backing plate or the piston or whatever. So what I'll do is I'll spin that rotor or move that rotor just a little bit, and you can tell which part is the rotor because it's so rusty. And then right behind the rotor is the pad material there, and you can see that right next to that is the backing plate. So this part here is the backing plate, that part is the rotor, and the pad is in between. And wow, that's really different. We have about 5mm of pad life on that inside pad. Let's see what the outside pad is. Now to measure the outside pad, I've got to force my little gauge right up into the pad surface in this little window between the edge of the rotor here and the caliper bracket. And it's really hard to see, but I'm measuring at about 3mm. So we'll double check this when we get everything back apart. But right away I'm thinking the fact that there's such a major discrepancy in between the inside and the outside pad, it could mean that we've got a seized caliper or sticking caliper slider pins. So I always like to measure both the inside and the outside brake pad before I get started with a brake job, so that I can kind of do my diagnostics as I'm working through the job. Just, you know, I don't know, or catching any issues as they may come. Now here looking at the back side of the brakes, I have my magnetic flashlight hanging up so I can see. I have my brake fluid bleeder bottle sitting right down here. I've got my little 8mm wrench, and I got some PB blaster, some penetrating lubricant. And just in case these are seized, I've also got my other little bleeder. Part number 13905. I just got this at my local O'Reilly Auto Parts. Bleeder screws, pack of 2. First thing I'm gonna do before I start taking this apart, I like when the caliper is actually solidly bolted down, it's not moving, and this is when I'm just gonna check it. Okay, see, I didn't even need that PB blaster. Now let's see if I'm gonna get any fluid out of it. We are getting a whole bunch of nothing, so I'm just gonna unscrew this all the way. At this point, you get some drops. And I'm gonna put this one in. Screw it all the way in, screw it back out just a little bit, hook up my bleeder bottle, just like that. And the reason I do that is because as I push those pads in a little bit to get this caliper off, that fluid has to go somewhere. So if I'm pushing that piston back in, that fluid is either gonna go back through the brake line up until the master cylinder, and just like all that dirty fluid is just gonna be within the system, or I can just push it out and then replace it. And like I said, I am actually gonna do a brake flush later on today too. Okay. Bottom slider. That actually came out fairly easily. Top slider. Ooh, that one. Is that unscrewed all the way? Yeah, it is. Okay. Ooh. Am I sure it's unscrewed all the way? Yeah, it's unscrewed all the way. Okay. That one. I'm actually going to use this to try to get it out. It is all the, there we go. Threads are out, but I just need a little twisting force. Oh! Oh yeah. You can see this one is rusty, and all of that was lube has just hardened on there. Whereas this one, see how it's still shiny? Like that lube is actually still doing its job. So this is the one that came out easy, and this is the one I had to sort of force out of there. We'll be cleaning both of those up later. Now I'm gonna pull off my caliper. But at this point is when I'm going to use my flathead screwdriver, because as I showed you earlier, this rotor has a major ridge on it. So you're going to have to actually force the pads out a little bit further to overcome that ridge when you're pulling this off. So what I do is in between the rotor, the old rotor we're replacing, and the old brake pad that we're replacing, is where I'll sort of jam my screwdriver and just separate the two just a little bit. So you can actually put it inside of the rotor here where the little slots are. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. So I'm pushing that way and you can see the caliper movement now, and then that frees up inside between the pad and the rotor, and then I'm just able to push that piston in even more. What kind of is disconcerting is I don't see any fluid coming out. So I hope this caliper is okay, but now I'm going to lift it up, pick it up, and set it aside right there. Whoa, okay, holy smokes, look at how thin this outside brake pad is towards the top, and look how thick the inside pad is. Woo, that is not a good sign. I hope this caliper is okay. I also see how I just like laid it on top of the rear axle here, and I mean it looks like this is all twisted up, but it's fine. I'm not causing any harm here. Now if you do have to use a hammer later on, which we may, this is when you'd want to use something to hang the caliper from, just so it doesn't fall and then put a bunch of pressure on the soft hose, because that can cause it to fail internally, and you can end up with a whole bunch of other problems, aside from just, you know, the mess you're already dealing with. I like to hang it through the bolt hole like that, and there's a little hole in the frame that I stuck the other side through there, so that's what we got going on right now. But man, look at those pads. All right, let's get those pads out of there. All right, just prying these out with my flathead screwdriver here. Oh my God. All right, one side. And the rear side has something on it that you'll want to save. And you can see that this is on the upper part of the pad, and that is this squealer tab. Now, depending on what brake pad kit you get, most, not all, but most will not come with this. So you're gonna have to swap it over. So we'll grab that. We're gonna set these aside. Wowee, sorry, I can't get over that. That is less than 2 millimeters for sure. And then also looking at this inside pad, look at the wear here. That's very interesting. So you see how it's worn down way more on the outside edges than in the middle. So curious to see what that rotor's gonna look like. Next, we're gonna remove the caliper bracket, which is what I have my two 17 millimeter wrenches for. This one for torque, and this one for just getting stuff done. And this is actually not for the driver's side, this is for the passenger side. On the passenger side, the shock is in the way and makes it so that I cannot fit this tool. But on this side, we're just gonna use power tools because we can. Now it's time to remove the rotor, and this is what I normally do to remove rotors. Now this Tundra has been relatively tame. This one's, it has behaved for me today, but quite often these get seized on there. So I like to just start by a little PB blaster, just really in between the mating surface here of like, I don't know, this portion of the axle and then the rotor itself. And then I'll take a hammer, and I just, whoa, give some love taps in between where the little studs are. You can see everything that's coming off of it, so much dust, right? So it's gotta do something. Then I'll grab my 2 little Prius recall bolts, and you can see that there are 2 little threaded holes. There's a bunch of holes in this rotor, but there are 2 little threaded holes that look like they don't go all the way through, like they're gonna bottom out on something. Since bolts normally don't live in those holes and they're also subjected to a bunch of heat, I like to thread these in by hand first just to make sure I'm actually getting them in the threads, because quite often there's a bunch of rust in there and the threads just don't want to cooperate. This one didn't really want to go in, so I'm like, not sure if I got it started or not, so I'm gonna be very careful with that one. Make sure I get them started. Okay, I actually think that's okay. Ah! And then I'll give them a little pressure to start, and usually all you need to do is just hand tools with these. But if you give pressure and it doesn't want to move, then you give a little pressure in conjunction with a little force. Oh, try to save my hearing here. Ah, you see that? Just, I mean, only a little tap. Once you got that pressure there, it wants to come. It wants to. Yay! Ta-da! Whoa, that is a lot of brake dust inside of there. I wonder if someone drove with the e-brake on. Oh gosh. Now look how rusty the back of this rotor is. Look at that. And it really doesn't look like, it's so interesting. It looks like the pad was definitely like wearing around on the rusty sides there. Oh, it's so weird. It doesn't look like it was doing much of anything, especially with how thick it was. So, all right, interesting. So I'm very glad we're replacing this today. And while we're in here, of course, we're going to take a look at our e-brake shoes. They're plenty thick, they're fine. We don't need anything back here. But one thing that I will do, because they're normally glazed, although these really don't look awful, this is where the emery cloth comes in. So I'll always grab just a little bit, like a teeny tiny little square, and I'll just draw an X pattern on the side of the shoe, and that's it. So I'll just do the whole shoe, just scuffing up the surface one way. Then I'll go back down going the other way. I'm just cleaning them up for the new rotors. So I'm giving them a chance to like re-break in or re-bed basically. Move on to the other side. See, nice little X's all the way across. You can also lube up some brake parts. Like I might spray some lube on the star wheel here and just make sure that it's happy. And then also to see like the rust that's happening like right there. This is the lubrication point right in here for where the shoes move. So I'll go in and I'll lift all these up and I'll re-lube those contact points. There's 6, 3 per shoe. And I'll re-lube up that star wheel. You don't have to do that. But another thing that you actually have to do when you're in here is make sure, obviously this is wet here, but make sure that inside here is dry. Just check your axle seals and make sure everybody's happy. We'd see dampness right up in here. I'm not seeing any dampness up in there, which is phenomenal. Man, I am so glad. I do not want to do axle seals on this thing at all. And you're really not going to see this in Texas, but you will see this if you live in the rust bucket anywhere, is on this backing plate, you've got this little ridge right here that sort of like keeps the shoes all nice. And that rides, oh God, whew. Actually they don't touch at all, but that little thing goes inside of this hole right here in the rotor, this little ridge. So what can happen is that over time, like this can either deform or rust can build up on it. And if you don't clean that off, you put the new rotor on and these are gonna make the most terrible sound. And I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. So that's where this tool comes in. I actually did have to do this on the other side. There was like some rust that created those raised little rust bubbles. And so when I put the rotor on and I turned it, like you could hear it, like it did, you know. So what I do Like I said, this one looks great, so I'm not that worried about it. But what I'll do is I'll go in with like a wire wheel, and I will just grind off all the way around that outside edge. And you'll sometimes have to do it on the inside too. Although for the inside, I'll just take, not a pocket screwdriver, but wherever my other screwdriver went, I'll take a screwdriver and I'll just scrape off all the rust on the inside of that ridge too. And like I said, if you don't, I mean, if it's your vehicle, drive it long enough and it'll rub itself off. But if it's a customer vehicle, the first thing they're gonna do is they're not gonna say, wow, great job on my brakes. They feel good. I'm so glad you kept me safe and kept me from my 1 millimeter brake pad. No, they're gonna say my brakes are making noise. And you don't wanna have a customer return angry at you, especially when you've done such a good job everywhere else on the brakes. So just make sure that you take your time and scrape all of that off. And I actually I'll tell my service advisor, which is now me. So but I'll tell the customer. Say, hey, like I'm gonna have to spend a little bit of extra time on that. But when I worked at the dealership, I would tell my service advisor, like, look, I'm gonna have to put in some labor to actually clean these up, and I would get like an extra 0.2 or 0.3 for myself, and I would be able to sell that. So yeah, let them know, make a little extra money on it. Prepare yourself ahead of time. Like if you see rust anywhere else on the truck, like this truck is really rusty, prepare yourself and make sure that you're selling the job appropriately and add that extra 0.2 or 0.3 ahead of time so that you're not resentful of the fact that the truck needs a little bit more of your love and your time. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up, and I will lube up my star wheel adjuster, sort of get this old dirt off of there. I'll do it with a little bit of brake clean. And I will re-lube these points just so that my e-brake doesn't make any noise. So I'll see you back here in a second. And to lube our little spots, I like to take a little acid brush, because it says like brush and can. I hear ya, but like, how am I gonna lube up in there without getting this all over the shoe? You're just not. So I take a little acid brush and I give it a little haircut, and I just use that. I mean, this brush is fine for like lubing the back of a brake pad, but and then I'll just go in with my little pocket screwdriver and gently pull the shoe away from the backing plate, and I'll just get it in there. And then I'll do the same thing for all of the little lube points. This is kind of a bonus. You don't have to do this, but I find that it helps. So just very, 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 very lightly, and then clean up any excess, any residue, because if you put too much in there, then it's gonna attract dirt, and then that will make noise. So you can see my contact points, one there, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then for the star wheel, a little bit of grease, but mostly I just sprayed a little bit of PB Blaster in there, just so that I'd still be able to adjust them in the future if needed. All right, I'm feeling good about the cleanliness. Feeling good about the lubrication, feeling good about the backing plate not being rusty, but we won't know until we put the new rotor on, really, to be honest. There have been times where I've cleaned these, I think, so well, and then I put the new rotor on, and I have not cleaned them so well. I'll also know, though, when you put the rotor on, don't just, like, put it on and spin it and be bummed. Put your lug nuts on, because that's gonna hold it in place, and then you actually know if it's gonna rub or not. So I mean, you might, even before you clean it off, you might even at this point do, I've got a little spacer nut I normally put on, so I don't have to thread the lug nuts on all the way. You don't have to put them all on, but to get a really good sense of if it's gonna make noise, just put 3 on real quick. Also, quick note, if you are using the power stop rotors and you accidentally take off the sticker and you're like, oh no, which one's right and which one's left, or which one's driver's side, which one's passenger side. So when you're looking at these slots, see the drills in the slots, I guess. I don't know. These lines should be facing the back of the vehicle. Like if you were to put water on there and then spin it in the direction, like it would go off in the right way. Does that make sense? Right, because you're driving forward, and these are going, the line should be facing the back of the vehicle. Okay, anyway, I'm spinning this I'm not hearing anything. Every now and then I hear a little something, but the e-brake shoe as well, rubbing up against. So make sure, if it's the backing plate, it's gonna be consistent the entire time, making an annoying sound. In that case, I did hear a little something, but I think it's actually the e-brake shoe that I messed with. So also when we're leaving, driving off the lift or driving out of the shop, I'm gonna go backwards, nice and slow, and then engage and release the e-brake a couple times, slowly, as I'm backing up, and that'll just help to reset those shoes, and then that way you'll know is it actually the e-brake making noise or not. Okay, but honestly, I'm happy with that. And we're gonna clean it off. Do you ever look up the proper procedure for cleaning off rotors? They say like soap and water, or like soap and hot water. I've never done that. I'm just gonna use this brake parts cleaner, and we're gonna stand far away because I actually sprayed myself in the eye last night. I've done that in a long time, so I guess it was about time that I humbled myself. And that's just even if they don't look dirty. Obviously, the brake rotors will come with a coating on them so that they don't rust, or when they're sitting on the shelf waiting for you to buy them. So I'm just gonna spray them off both sides. I like to use a clean towel to wipe them clean and get all that residue off. All right, now I'm gonna flip it over and clean off the other side. And this is not something you have to do, but I'm a little neurotic. I like to line up. Even though these rotors are totally different, I can see the spot where I had used the little screws, and I'm just putting it on the same way. No, absolutely not necessary. Why do I do what I do? I don't know. And the main spot you want to wash it off is just where the brake pad is going to be riding. Also, I should say the holidays are upon us. What do you guys want for Christmas? For the holidays? Let me know in the comments below. Also, this customer had purchased a whole set of front and rear brakes. They're not the best quality. So I actually convinced him to go with the power stop. So we're doing power stop on this truck all the way around. However, I have a full set of front and rear pads and rotors that I am not gonna use. And I'm not gonna put on my customer vehicles just because I fear sometimes when the quality isn't there, they don't last as long, and then I can't back them with like my crazy warranty. But if you are in the San Antonio area and the holidays have got you in a tough spot, but you need brakes and you just want these, you just need something to last you a little bit, let me know and you can have them. All right, now I'm gonna put the lug nuts back on. Once again, why? Because we want the caliper bracket and the caliper to sit on there all nice. All right, so now we're gonna prepare our caliper bracket. So we got these little hardware pieces here where the brake pads ride. And now the power stop kit does come with new ones. So if you have the power stop kit, go ahead and replace them if you feel like you need them, or if they have lost tension. But a lot of times if they're sticking in there really well and they're not just like flopping out and coming out on their own, I'll reuse them because the OE ones are fine. And we don't know what you've got at home. Hopefully you've got the power stop kit too, but if you don't, we're just gonna walk you through how to clean these and how to put them back on. So first of all, I'm gonna do them one at a time, just in case I forget where they go or what orientation. If you pull them all off, then you're like, where the heck were they, right? So once I get the little bracket out, I'm just gonna clean all of the dust out from there. Ooh, somebody's having fun out there. And now, you do wanna wear your mask when you're doing this or have like good ventilation. You don't wanna be breathing this stuff in. That looks nice and clean. And we'll just give it a little wipe out as well. And then if we're reusing this, I'm gonna brush this off as well. And then we're gonna put a little anti-seize on this. There we go. Just clean it off. And make sure that nothing's broken or looking like it's gonna break. And right now, it's not. This piece looks great. I feel totally fine reusing this. If yours looks like this, you can reuse it. And now as far as anti-seize goes, this is, my friend Danny calls this elephant paint. Why, you ask? Because it's the color of an elephant, maybe? No, because this entire tube could paint an entire elephant. That being said, use it sparingly, people. Use it way sparingly. Like, we're not gonna just, like, that's excessive, right? We're not going for this look. That's not cute. Because anything that remains on here is just gonna collect dirt, and dirt is going to create noise. So you want a very, 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 very paper thin layer on here. Like, you know, that for the sake of demonstration, that was a little bit too much. Let's wipe it off. Okay, so even after I wipe it off, like that's good. No more than that, okay? And this is also the only place that I do ever use. Ooh, I forgot to put some right there. I was talking and I wasn't paying attention. Just a very little bit. This is the only place that I will use anti-seize. Anywhere on the brakes. Oh, with the exception of sometimes. So you saw how this was super easy to get off, right? The rotor was so easy to separate from this little hub area. Well, if it wasn't, if it was super rusty and you're afraid you're not gonna be able to get it off next time, I will put anti-seize in between these two sealing surfaces. So I put it on and then I just sort of spread it out and around too, because the whole back surface of the rotor touches, and I don't know. Careful with your hands, not to touch. Grab it by this part. Amazing. Okay, that little intermission, back to the bracket. All right, so we did the first one really thoroughly. I don't think I have to go through the rest that thoroughly. So I'll just speed up and get through this. There we go. All right. Any residual on your finger can go a little bit of anti-seize. And like I said, these are the only two places that we're actually using anti-seize. Anti-seize does not play nice with rubber stuff. So we're not gonna use it in here as well, which is the next thing that we're gonna clean and lube, which is arguably the most important part of this job. All right, so we've got these two little rubber bushings. If you can, pull them out and clean them. If they don't want to come, just leave them be. There's nothing you can do about it, that's fine. I'll put a little bit of penetrating lube in there just to free up any rust or prevent any future rust, because it'll sort of leave a little coating on there. And I love this thing. I got this from Harbor Freight, and it comes with a bunch of attachments. So this is like a quick disconnect here, and look at that style of ends. You can also put this in a drill, so it just goes right in there, and it comes with a bunch of different sizes. It comes with so these are like the gold style, probably brass or whatever, and then there's also like some silver ones, and then there's some plastic ones as well, so you can use this on all sorts of things. But I just love using this in there to get all of that rust out. And as you saw, this was really, really, really bad. I've actually put these on a drill before and got in there, but it's like, it's a little too intense for me. There, and this was actually the one, the slider pin that was sticking. As you can see, like, look at that. That's really gross. That's really, really rusty and nasty. There, you can see the stuff coming out. Now just be careful on this one with the rubber. Don't do quite so much in and out, just, you know. But you don't rip these, okay? Don't rip these. So now I'm actually gonna go outside and blow this out with compressed air, and I'm just gonna be careful not to breathe it in. Just obviously face it away from your body. Blow that debris out the door. So now I'm gonna take my caliper slider pins over to the wire wheel, and I'm gonna clean off all of this gunk before reinstalling them. Beautiful, look at that end result. Now, especially if your slider pins were not happy with sliding back and forth. Oh God. Yeah, that's the problem. This one's great. All right, I'm still gonna do some work to that one apparently, but what I was gonna say is, if you're upset about the amount of rust that was in there and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do the greatest job lubing these ever now. If you put too much, it actually isn't gonna move in and out nicely. So you can see how like it's not that much of a coating in there. It's just easy does it. And then I'm also going to just clean out the boot. You can blow this out with compressed air if it's really bad. This one is not really bad, but I'm gonna take my little brush. I'm gonna coat the inside of this with the brake lube and then just sort of mush it all around. All right, and then you see that side has like the little lip to it and that side doesn't. I know it kind of looks like it does, but that's the side that goes back inside. So now we're gonna gently push that back inside. There we go. This one is harder to clean because this rubber goes all the way through. And if this rubber swells up, then this caliper slider will seize inside of there. So do not use anything other than brake grease in there. If you use the anti-seize formula, it can actually react with this stuff and it'll swell, and then you're gonna be replacing this bushing, or you might be one of those people that's accidentally sold a whole new caliper because they look at the pads, see that they're wearing unevenly, just like in this case. And we can see that I bet this was a contributing factor to the problem. So, but I'm happy with that's not getting stuck in there anymore. The only part that's getting stuck is there's a little ridge right there on the slider pin that goes into the rubber there and holds it so that when this slides in and out and moves, the rubber slides with it, so you're not getting any dirt and debris down inside of there. So, cool. Once again, I've got my brake parts lube, and we're not gonna put too much of this lube on there. This is too much. Night and day difference. I love how that slides. Okay, this bracket is ready for reinstall. Did a quick check of the bolts for our caliper bracket just to make sure I didn't have to bring them over to the wire wheel, take off any debris, but these look phenomenal. Now this is not required, but I just can't help myself. I gotta put a little red Loctite on there, but I put it on one and then I sort of mesh them together. The torque spec for these is 70 foot-pounds, and I'm now realizing that I did not put my torque wrench in the tool list. How dare I? And I already did this one. Double check, 70 foot-pounds. So now we're gonna prepare the pads for installation onto that caliper bracket now that it's sitting in its happy little home and there's no chance these are gonna fall out. Now on the power stop brakes, you've got this anti-squeal shim which is like sort of adhered to it. You can't really separate these two. Now if you could, you'd wanna lube underneath it because that's just what you need to do for Toyotas to keep them quiet. On the factory pad or on the previous pad that has a similar to factory design, you'll find that there's actually two of these. Quite often these two are glued together. If they're not, you're gonna wanna lube both of these pieces in between the two and then on the back side before it goes onto the pad. It's quite a lot. But these, since the power stop ones are all stuck together and they're not gonna be moving around and everyone's happy, then just leave them be. I'm gonna take a little bit of the power stop brake lube, or if you don't have the power stop ones, you can just use like regular brake lube, that's fine. And I'm just gonna put a tiny little bit on these little tabs that are sticking out. And then this one, same thing, just lube these little tabs. There, so you see I like did not use that much at all. And I'm going to grab off of the former inside pad, this little guy, my little squealer tab. Clean it off real quick. Either of these could be the inside or the outside pad. So let's make this one the inside pad and we'll put that squealer tab. It's a little tight. Not the right tool for this job, but it's the right tool if it works, right? So we'll put this one on the inside and our other pad on the outside. Now before I'm able to get the caliper back on over these new massive pads that are like so nice and thick, I've actually got to push the piston back inside so that it will be able to slide back on. So to do that, I've got an old pad. So I'm going to put an old brake pad. I've seen people do this with new brake pads. I don't know who taught these people. And I don't know who taught me because I didn't bring my tool over here. What the heck? So I've got my old pad there pushing back in on the caliper. Make sure that my little bleeder screw is open and we're gonna watch this clear hose and make sure that fluid actually does come out. Okay, so we're just going to place it like that in between the bracket and the piston there. And then I'm just gonna slowly push that piston in and I'm gonna feel for it. I mean, the piston is moving nice and smoothly, but we're not getting any brake fluid. You should have fluid coming out of there, by the way. Now, what I will do is very gently just clean off the surface of the piston there where it's gonna be hitting the brake pad. Be very, very careful not to damage the rubber there. That rubber keeps dirt and debris from inside the caliper piston, and if it tears or anything like that, you get debris in there sooner than you want to, then that will also hurt the caliper. And I'm cleaning off any dirt or debris on these two little tabs here that touch the outer pad. So I've got my Power Stop lube, put just a little bit on my finger, and we're gonna put just a little bit on these fingers where they're touching the brake pad, and then here on the metal surface of the piston. And I'm gonna slide it over the pads there, making sure not to compress these little little squishy guys. All right, there we go. Now when you're installing this, you do wanna be careful that you get the little squishy guys lined up properly with the holes in the caliper, and then you put your little slider pins. So what's gonna happen is that rubber squishy will eventually hopefully seat on that ridge there on the bolt. And then this is also not necessary, but it's just something that I do. I like to just put a little bit of Loctite on these threads before installation. And then the torque spec for these guys is 65 foot-pounds. I like to thread these in by hand first. And then you can see as I'm pushing the caliper how much free motion those have. So I did a really good job lubing up those little slider pins. So now all that's left is to reinstall the wheels. I'm putting every single one of those lug nuts on by hand first, seating them all the way, then getting the Tundra off of the lift, getting its wheels planted firmly on the drive-on portion of the lift so it's fully weighted, then I can hand torque those lug nuts. The torque spec for these wheels is 97 foot-pounds. All right, and that pretty much wraps up this job. Now, for me, I'm still gonna go ahead and do a full brake flush, and that's because I actually replaced both the brake lines on the front of this Tundra because they were so rusty, and one of them was actually kinked and leaking at the junction right here. It was one of these. This one was kinked and leaking right there, and they were both super, super rusty. So I'm actually thinking that I might have just completely drained the brake system, and that's why I had no fluid coming out of that caliper. But we shall see, we shall see. So I'm gonna do a full brake flush, brake bleed on all four sides, and then I'm gonna go and do my test drive. And perhaps the most important part of this job is properly bedding in the brake pads to the new rotors. This is something that I do not see happen enough. So many times in the shop, you'll see someone do a brake job, pull the car up front, park it, give the keys to the customer, be like, bye. But there's actually a process for making sure that the pads and the rotors like mate together as a unit properly. And because we use the Power Stop kit, because I use the Power Stop kit, I'm gonna follow their brake bedding procedure, which is right here on the inside flap of the brake pads, the brake pad box. But honestly, no matter what brake pads and rotors you use today, this is a pretty good universal step-by-step process to follow. Just make sure that you choose a road that doesn't have any stop signs or any traffic lights on it. The last thing you want is to be doing your braking procedure and then you come to a red light and you have to stop and stand on the brakes. Don't do that. If you have to come to a full stop, put the vehicle in park and take your foot off the brake. That's the most important thing, because you don't want to get a hot spot on a certain part of that rotor and then cause it to warp during that braking procedure. You need to be fully moving so that air can move over the rotor and keep it nice and cool while you do this process. Okay, so I'll have this nice and steady and stable here up on the screen for you for a second. So if you wanted to screenshot this, just once again, in case you didn't buy the Power Stop kit, but you still want to do a proper, like a good bedding procedure, definitely do this. You can see right here, it wants 5 aggressive decelerations from 40 miles an hour down to 10 miles an hour in rapid succession without letting the brakes cool and do not come to a complete stop. All right, then we've got 5 moderate decelerations, and then you're gonna drive slowly over time to cool down the brakes. And it says 5 minutes. I do 5 minutes minimum. I'll drive around for quite a bit and then also feel and listen and everything like that. So this is a great process to follow. And I'm gonna do this as soon as I'm done bleeding the brakes. Now I'm gonna leave y'all here. Normally I do like to do a little driving footage, but I don't have a Brandon with me today. He's off doing wood things. He does have like a real life as a carpenter, so he cannot be my camera guy today or operate the drone. So you're just gonna have to trust me that I went out and drove the vehicle. I don't want to drive and film at the same time. So that is pretty much it though. You're gonna repeat the same process on the other side. This is a pretty easy job, and I hope that this was a pretty clear and easy to follow tutorial for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! We're doing some yard work today, and look at these grubs. Like, these are disgusting. My feet for reference. These were in my mulch pile. I don't know what to do with them, so I'm gonna give them to the chickens and just see what happens. Hi, ladies and gent. All right, let's see. Now, I'm not sure if they're gonna eat these. They're kind of scared of them. Oh, Thalia. They're kind of scary. They're kind of scary. Oh. They're kind of scared of them. Thalia isn't though. Thalia's going after it.
Is it scary? Are they scary?